My name is Stacy, and I am a professional development specialist at Dreambox. I know I've had a lot of you in webinars before. Today we're going to talk specifically about some of the lessons and the way the lessons are sequenced and structured in Dreambox. So we're talking about specifically addition and subtraction, and then we're going to go into how to use Dreambox for RTI. And throughout today's session, because you all do have microphones, feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you need me to repeat something, you have a question, you just want to make a comment about something. We do want to make this an interactive session, so feel free to pop in at any time if you need anything. All right, everyone? Okay, so as I said, during today's session, we're going to start with some Dreambox updates. We'll go into addition and subtraction lessons in Dreambox, and then we'll finish out with assigned focus, and that's how we're going to talk about that RTI, the long-term supports for your students. So starting off with Dreambox updates, there are a couple things that we were actually in Rochester yesterday, and we're lucky enough to visit a couple schools and see Dreambox in action. So there's some updates that I want to give you all, letting you know some things that are coming and then some things to look out for as you're implementing Dreambox this year. So one of the questions that we had about Dreambox and the student learning environment for kindergarten through second grade students was about the colors for the circles that you see. So you'll see some circles on the screen here. Each one of these circles represents a lesson in Dreambox. So as your kids are playing, you've probably seen these circles appear and they're clicking on one to get into a lesson. We do want our students to spend the bulk of their time selecting the yellow lessons. Those yellow lessons are the brand new lessons that Dreambox suggests for the student based upon their initial grade level setting, as well as how they've played through previous lessons. Because remember, our adaptive engine is always going to use the data on those previous lessons to determine what the next best lesson is for every single child at every point along the way. After they've completed a lesson, then you'll see that lesson that was completed turn to green and have a green check mark on it. Now students can go back and review that lesson to help them increase their fluency. I know I had a student yesterday who was sitting beside when they were playing, and they said, I'm going to go back and try it again because I think I could do even better this time, or I want a little bit of a review. So that's why we do keep it open for a short period of time, but we do want them to spend the bulk of their time in the yellow lessons. Now sometimes when a lesson is completed, like this green lesson here, sometimes we will have already suggested a couple other lessons, and you'll see one of the yellow lessons turn to orange after a lesson has been completed. And that's kind of our way of telling the student, when you completed this lesson, this green lesson here, it actually was connected to this lesson that just turned orange, and you showed us that you really tested out of this lesson. So we'll change a lesson to orange when the student, well, we still think it's okay for them to play through that lesson to get a little extra review and get some practice, but they've already shown us in a previous lesson, I've got this. I'm ready to move on to something more challenging. So that's the difference between the three different colors. I think the biggest thing we want to hone in on with our kids is that they need to go to the yellow lessons and complete those, because those are the brand new lessons that Dreambox is suggesting based upon how the child is playing at that point in time. Okay. Now going along with lessons, we really want to make sure that students are focusing on completing lessons in Dreambox above all else. One thing that we're going to be adding, hopefully in the next few months, although definitely by next school year, is a lesson count for the students. So this is a little screenshot of this. Whenever a student completes a lesson, so our student completed this lesson here, we see the circle with the green check mark on it. Their icon in the top left-hand corner of the screen is going to flash, and then this bar will come down and it will tell the student how many lessons they completed this week. We'll start the week Sunday morning and we'll end the week Saturday evening. So will be one calendar week. So that will be coming soon. It's being piloted in a few classrooms actually right now. So it'll be a great way to get the kids tracking their own data, which is really awesome. Another thing that we noticed when we went into classrooms was that sometimes we heard the kids coming into a Dreambox and spending a lot of time in some of the, what we call the engagement areas, or the spots that really aren't the lessons. They're the areas that where students can change their avatar, for example, or where the students can spend their gold coins to play some quick games. And you can turn those off. So I want to just give you all some quick instructions on how to turn those off here. So I've actually entered my teacher dashboard. Whenever you get into your teacher dashboard, you'll want to go into a class, and I'll do that by selecting one of these cards here. So I'm going to go into my kindergarten through second grade class. Now, once I'm in the class, you're going to see a little purple circle with a desk on it. That lets us know that we're actually in the classroom. And I'll go to the edit button. From the edit button, you just click on the engagement restrictions tab. And we want to set the school hours to accurately portray the time kids are actually in the building. So let's say that my school is in class from 8 to 3. Now I want to drop down to the section that says grades K2 learning environment. And here's where I decide whether they have access to the arcade where they spend their gold coins to play games, or my house, which is where they're generally there to change their avatar. So if I want to eliminate access for students, I'm just going to uncheck the boxes for the days that they don't have access. Now there are a couple different ways you can address this. I know we walked into some classrooms where yesterday where the teacher said they told the kids that they had to collect 6 more coins in order to get into those arcades. So that was a way that the students were goal setting and self-monitoring before they went into those engagement areas. Another option is to do exactly what I've done, is to uncheck the boxes for certain days of the week. To limit students' access, I just click the save button, and now my class can't have access Monday through Thursday, but they do get a bit of a reward and time to spend. They spend some time spending their coins and changing their avatar on Fridays. So that can be really motivational and allow them to look forward to some of that Friday activity. The other option also that I've seen in some schools is to actually turn it all off. Tell the kids, all right, I know that at kindergarten through second grade, we're supposed to complete 5 to 10 lessons. Set a goal, somewhere between 5 to 10 lessons for that week. And when you see that the class has met that goal, you can turn the arcade and my house back on. So it's totally up to you how you'd like to handle that. You know, I think you need to keep the students that you have in mind, of course, and what's going to motivate them best to make sure that they're really spending the bulk of their time in the math lessons themselves, not in the games as much. So, are there any questions about the process that I just went through, or I'd love to hear if you all have some suggestions or things that have worked for you to make sure that kids are really focusing on completing lessons. So feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself if you have a great idea. And we're going to go into addition and subtraction, and this is a bit of number sense as well. So when Dreambox was initially created, this was initially created not according to Common Core standards, because we're actually older than Common Core, but according to Dreambox learning units, which were based on and the NCTM standards of mathematical practice, taking into account students' developmental levels, where they should be, and also largely basing this on the work of Kathy Fosno. Kathy Fosno has a series of books, and actually this screenshot here is from one of her books, and this is from Young Mathematicians at Work, Constructing Number Sense Addition and Subtraction. You also should have this as a resource printout for today's webinar as well. But just taking a look at this landscape of learning, this is really a non-linear pathway that students need to sequence through in order to be proficient mathematicians, and this one specifically looking at number sense addition and subtraction. The landscape sequences from bottom to top. So when we're thinking about building those skills and strategies for addition and subtraction, we're starting first with our students on doing things like counting and subitizing, understanding magnitude, and then moving on up through the landscape of learning until they're understanding things like equivalence with place value and regrouping, which are much more complicated, and we address at higher grade levels. So one thing that I want to do just as a real quick exercise looking through the landscape of learning, you can look on the screen right now if you happen to have that number sense addition and subtraction printout. Go ahead and bring that up and take a look through the terminology and the landscape of learning. And let's start with the first question I want to focus on is, what terms do you currently call out and use with your students? Because there are some terms on this that we may not actually use with especially our younger students, but we as teachers have those kind of in the back of our mind as we're instructing and thinking about the learning that's going on in front of us. So what do you use? And feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat to share those as well. That's okay then. If you want to do this as a silent reflection, that's totally fine. I know that others who are going to be going through this webinar as a recording, so we can do it that way as well. I know some of the terms that we hear using with our students, I actually heard this in classrooms yesterday, are things like counting backwards, using the 10 frame, using the hundreds chart. You know, we saw those in classrooms when we were in Rochester yesterday. But there are also terms that we maybe change a bit to make them a bit more friendly. So just take a minute to take a look through this landscape of learning and think about the terms that maybe you don't use that word with your kids. Maybe there's another word that you use instead. So some things that come to mind, for example, are associativity and commutativity. You might say that in a different way, especially when you're working with the younger students. And then next, think about which terms you don't use with your students, but might be helpful to use with them, especially given certain levels of learners. Which kids need that vocabulary to help call out that skill or strategy or big idea, or even the model that you're using? And then finally, one way that I like to use the landscape of learning is to help me understand the learning trajectory that my kids currently are on. So while this doesn't work as a linear pathway, because we all know that learning is not linear, so it makes teaching so challenging. Think about the terms or the concepts, the strategies, the big ideas and models that your students struggle with. So one concept that I heard yesterday was that students are really having a hard time with understanding removing, or the concept of less. And one great way to use this landscape of learning is to take a look at the concept that or the strategy, big idea, or model that your students are struggling with, and then look below it on the landscape of learning to figure out if there's something else they're missing, some gap that they're having. So if they are not understanding counting on, is there something below that they're not understanding? So that can also be helpful as well as just as a tool for planning our instruction. So if I'm not understanding the 5 structure, or sorry, the 10 structure, I want to think back and say, are they using the 5 structure appropriately? Do they understand that as a basis to then allow them to understand the 10 structure? Just as an example. Yeah, and Shannon, that is absolutely common. Some of your lower students are still struggling with number identification 1 to 10. And is that also not only identifying objects 1 to 10, but also numbers 1 to 10, the actual numerals? Yeah, and the 6 to the 9 are really difficult. And 6 to 10, yeah. So they're still working. They've got the 1 to 5, but that 6 to 10 is really challenging for them. Yeah. So when you look at this chart or this landscape of learning, you're going to notice that there are different symbols. We've colored them in 3 different colors, but we've also got symbols for each concept or strategy. So the reason why these look different is that some of them are strategies. So those are the blue rectangles, are strategies. The big ideas are in green, and then the models are the orange triangles. And these all work together to help students gain a better understanding at each level. So a strategy is how students accomplish an activity. So those are things like one-to-one tagging, 1 to 9 sequence when counting on in order to add. So one thing to note about these strategies is we want our students to be able to use all of these strategies as they sequence through the landscape of learning. So we want to make sure that they have been exposed to all of the strategies so that when they select a strategy to help them problem solve, they're working with efficiency. So you're actually going to see that quite often in the Dreambox lessons. So if, for example, students working with the math rack, for example, and we're asking them to construct the number 13. One strategy they could use is tagging 1 bead at a time. But we really want them to hone in on the 5 structure and the 10 structure within that math rack to help them move with efficiency. So we're asking them to use, so moving from one-to-one tagging here at the bottom to using 5 structure, using 10 structure, and also using using strategies like counting on. The big ideas are going to be in green, and they're in an oval. So the big ideas include understanding concepts like one-to-one correspondence or understanding the relationship between addition and subtraction. When students are able to demonstrate their strategies and understanding, they're going to use models to do that. The models are in the triangles, and this is how they represent their thoughts. So when a student is working with the 10 frame, they're showing us if they're using 1 bead at a time to fill in that 10 frame, where they are on this landscape of learning, as opposed to if they're using groups of 5, they're showing us a different level of understanding. So that really helps Dreambox see, and you all as teachers see exactly where the student is and their use of the strategies when they're engaging with those models. It's really important to stress that for each child, the landscape of learning is going to be sequenced a little bit differently. So some children will need to pass through all of the landmarks or going through all of those big ideas and spending time to really deeply look at them. And then other students won't need to visit every single lesson in order to understand this concept. The concepts, use the strategies efficiently and show understanding of the big ideas. And also the order is going to be different for every student. So some students will be able to skip ahead, and some students will need to, other students will need to be pulled back a bit on this landscape of learning. So just want to note that as we go through this landscape of learning today. Now, if you want to go deeper into some of these concepts in Dreambox, you all do have professional development on demand available to sequence through all of the lessons that students would, the big lessons that students would see for addition and subtraction. And I'm going to show you how to get into that. You all actually have a pretty quick and easy way to get into that from your teacher dashboard. So I'm going to go back into my teacher dashboard, and I'm going to show you a way that you can get into some of these lessons, just if you're curious about how to do so. And you all are actually part of a pilot program for this. So when you log into your teacher dashboard, you're going to see 3 tabs: classes, students, and my PD. Now, if you happen to have an administrator account for Dreambox, you actually have to go into the teacher view, like I'm in right now, to see this tab. You will not see it at the administrator level at this time. So I'm going to go into my PD tab, and this is a way that from my dashboard, I can see the different Dreambox lessons that are really aimed at teachers that are available to me. So I've got using Dreambox in the classroom, getting started, what is Dreambox? One section that we are updating right now is this analyzing data to inform instruction. There are lots of really great kind of mini lessons on how to use the Dreambox data. And then specifically, what we've been talking about today is going to be at the bottom of that My PD page. There's number sense, addition, and subtraction lessons, and they are going to be separated by grade level. So this is just something that's going to be available to you all to investigate and to see some of these lessons in action. You'll see the tools feature, the strategies, and those big ideas featured in every single one of these lessons. The other way to get to that is to go to the resource hubs from your dashboard, and then go into your teacher hub. And there's actually a PD on demand link in the top right-hand corner. And you all do have unlimited access because you do have a subscription. So that would allow you to get logged in and see all of the concepts here. So just another way to see that information if you're curious and want to do some learning on your own. So if you are using that My PD tab as you're using your dashboard, which we'd love to have you all do, if you have any feedback on that or any ideas, because you all are actually part of a pilot group to have access to that, you can send us feedback. The email is feedback@dreambox.com. Just let us know any ideas you have, or if you've had any issues with anything. Like I said, you are a pilot group. We're still trying things out, making sure everything's working correctly. So we'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts. And I do want to just pause for a second, see if anyone has any questions about that landscape of learning, or about the My PD tab or PD on demand.
Stacy, I do real quick. My PD tab. When you click on view, is it possible to show us like something like real quick? Is it for students, or not for students, but is it like a lesson, or is it more of a teacher descripted piece?
Sure, absolutely. Good question. So let's go to this analyzing data to inform instruction. So here, this is really a lesson. I'm going to end my tour here. So I can go into analyzing data to inform instruction, and this is going to give me access to different lessons that I want to view. And these lessons are videos that actually walk you through either Dreambox lessons, or through the dashboard, or concepts or suggestions we have for you, for example. So here, if I want to go into lesson 1 on growth and proficiency, I click into the lesson, and there's a brief almost 2-minute video to watch. There are also progress checks to go throughout to check her understanding throughout the way. There are also discussion boards. So if you want to engage with other adult learners in this platform, then you can do so as well. And at the end, if you complete an entire module, there's a certificate that you could print out.
Great, thanks, Stacy.
Absolutely, great question. Thank you. All right. So we're going to keep on going, and we're going to talk next about RTI, or response to intervention. And I'm going to let you just take a moment to read this definition of RTI from the Colorado Department of Education. So RTI is really a way that we use the data to help us inform our instructional practices to make sure that every student gets what they need. And I know that a lot of teachers in Rochester are really integrating this into their instructional practices. When we're using RTI, we're thinking about this as a framework that's organized by tiers of instruction that are categorized by the layers of student support. And really we want students don't get locked into any one of these tiers. Instead, they move flexibly and fluidly through these tiers based upon their level of instructional need. So if I'm in tier 1 week for a specific standard, I may not stay there all year. Maybe I might need extra support in the following standards that we work on later on in the year. And we want to make sure that students are continually assessed within all of those tiers to make sure that they're always provided with the right level of support. So when we think about these tiers, tier 1 students is where we want most of our students to be. So they receive instruction at tier 1, which is just defined as high quality evidence-based instruction. Class differentiation and group interventions are provided as needed within this tier. This is also where we use the universal screenings and assessments to provide some predictive validity on students to figure out exactly where we need to gauge instruction throughout the year. Tier 2 is really this where students need more support, more intensive intervention based on their levels of performance and the rate of their progress. We know that some of our students are going to take a little bit more time to get where they need to be. And so those are our tier 2 kids. And I know that sometimes our tier 2 kids are challenging for us to be able to reach. And when we were in the classrooms yesterday, we saw a lot of different ways that tier 2 kids are being supported in Rochester. So I know we've only got a couple folks, a couple teachers in the room today. I'd love to hear from everyone in the webinar. If you can tell me how you all are supporting the students in tier 2.
I know some schools that I'm in have a walk to intervention. And so they have different intervention, different teachers supporting that, different programs.
Awesome. All right, so we heard from Jesse's, they've got walk to intervention too, but this point it's only for ELA.
And that's fairly typical. So like for grades 3 through 6, we just created and sent out some intervention documents that map standards. And that we found is really helpful. For K2, one of the reasons, we're doing this webinar tonight is to see how Dreambox can support with that, because part of intervention has to happen in that 80-minute math instructional block through strategic groupings. But we also know there are some opportunities for either push in or pull out services as well.
Absolutely, and it's especially challenging given that you have to do it during that time block. That's actually great. It gave me the great segue, thanks, Jeff, into what we're going to talk about next using Dreambox for tier 2. So
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure I get this out there. So for tier 2, Jeff, you said it was during the 80-minute block. I thought tier 2 had to be outside of the core instruction, though.
I'm making sure I'm still not muted. So I don't think it needs to be outside of the core instruction. It has to be, I think, above and beyond what you would normally give to all of your students. So
okay.
So just let me elaborate for one quick second. So like many school districts, their math block is only 60 minutes long. So like when we have an 80-minute math block, knowing that we have so many kids that are struggling and are behind in a grade level, part of the reason that extra time was incorporated is so we can work those kinds of services in.
Yeah, I mean, I have centers. Like I do basically do like a whole group as quick as I can and get them into centers, and that's all broken apart based on, you know, where they're at currently and their different, you know, what they're showing based on different assessments. But and I do that for ELA and math, but I was told that that's not tier 2, that tier 2 has to be out of the core instructional time. So I'm just, I guess I just need, maybe there needs to be a consensus on that, because that's not what I'm, you know what I mean?
So part of what, and I hope Shannon doesn't mind my sharing, well, and never mind, Shannon said this to everyone. So Shannon mentioned the district really needs to get intervention teachers, especially at the K level. So my concern about that definition of tier 2 intervention is we currently don't have enough teachers that could adequately pull students outside of that core instructional time to provide that. So
Right, and they told us that tier 2 is supposed to be done by the teacher. Tier 3 is the only one where kids are getting pulled out. So tier 2, I'm supposed to find, you know, like I've been integrating it during, you know, social studies or science or something like that. So I guess, I don't know, it sounds, just from hearing from you tonight and hearing that, it's just a little bit frustrating, because I want to know exactly and how to do this, and it's hard to know where to go when you're hearing, you know, different things. So don't mean to be the devil's advocate. I just, you know, I just want to make sure everything's clear for me.
sure, and we'll work to get you clarity on that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. So hopefully Dreambox can help with this too. So what we're going to do now is talk about the long-term assignments and how you can use this for at tier 2 intervention for your kids. So in a previous webinar, we did talk about assign focus specifically, and that's the ability for teachers to create specific assignments using the standards at any grade level for their students. So we're going to go through just the mechanics real quick as a review on how to make an assignment, and then we'll talk more in depth about how to use a long-term assignment for targeted intervention for students. So if I log into my teacher dashboard and I select a class, one of the top things that I might want to do before I make an assignment is to review the data to make sure that I'm making the right level of assignment for all of my students, or for the student that or group of students that I'm working with. Which, by the way, you can do an assignment for an individual student, for a group of students, or for an entire class. It's really up to you which kids get which assignment. When I go into the standards tab, the first view that I see in the standards tab of where my students are is the grid view. Now that grid view will show me a nice bird's eye view of where my students are for all of the standards at any grade level that I choose. So I happen to be in grade 1 right now, and I can see that quite a few of my students are working on grade 1 content. But as I look at the students in my class, I know Charlie is not working in grade 1 content just yet. Neither is Mamie, Roxana, or Valencia. When I see those open circles, that tells me that they're not working on the Dreambox content at first grade, because Dreambox really has determined the student needs something else at a lower grade level. To see where they are, I can always change the grade level to kindergarten, drop it down a bit, and now I can see that Charlie and the other students, Roxana, Valencia, and Mamie, are all working through this content at a lower grade level. So I may want to take a look at this chart before I make any assignments, just to see what grade level is my student working in, and then use that data to help me determine what grade level assignment I need to make. So the reason why I do that is that I could make an assignment at any grade level. Let's say I'm a 2nd grade teacher, and I know I'm teaching my 2nd grade standards, but I've got a child who I know is working at a kindergarten level. I don't necessarily want to give them a long-term assignment on a second grade standard if I know that there are more foundational standards at kindergarten and first grade this child has not mastered yet. Instead, what I would want to do is leverage Dreambox to help fill in the gaps at the kindergarten and first grade level for the standards that the student's going to need to have those gaps filled in to really perform at the second grade level. And there's a couple really great questions from Shannon and Rosie about interventions. So Jeff, Larissa, if you have, if you know the answer to those questions in the Rochester context, feel free to jump in at any time if you know if we're allowing this to use Dreambox as part of the RTI plan or computer-assisted instruction for intervention. Because I know that decision varies from district to district.
So as far as computer-assisted instruction for intervention, it should never be something that's solely computer-assisted. So putting kids in front of a product like Dreambox, if we were saying that's all we're doing to provide intervention for kids, that's not what we're envisioning. But as far as being a component of that, I think that is appropriate.
Okay, great, thanks. I appreciate that answer. All right, so now let's go to make an assignment. Just as a quick review, so I can make an assignment from the grid view by clicking on the assignment icon here, one of these buttons, if I select a particular standard that I want to make the assignment for. Or I could also use the drop down here to change to the grouping view. And I can select the domain and the standard or cluster that I want to assign. So for example, I know that some of my students are having trouble with composing and decomposing numbers. I want to give them extra practice. So that's for Charlie, Roxana, and Valencia. And I know that this is going to be a skill that's going to be really important for them to have down before I teach a first grade standard. So I can click the Add Assignment button. And I can make a long-term assignment to provide the student with more long-term targeted Dreambox lessons, specifically speaking to this topic. So when I get to the assignment page, I select long-term and decided that I want them to work on this for 4 weeks. Now, during that 4-week time period, they will have consistent Dreambox lessons that are related to composing and decomposing numbers at the kindergarten level. They will continue to get those lessons either until they reach 100% proficiency for this topic or until the 4 weeks are up. I've already got my grade level, my domain and standard already filled in. And then at the bottom, I select the students. And don't forget that before you make an assignment, you might want to preview the lessons. So there are preview lesson buttons in the middle of the screen here where I can see the just started lessons that Charlie and Roxana would experience when they start this long-term assignment. I can also view the standard in progress lesson. So this is a lesson that's about halfway through the group of lessons. This is closer to what Valencia would see. Now, if you notice, I've only got 3 students that I've selected for this long-term assignment. That's because these are kids who either haven't started working on this topic or who are currently working through this topic in Dreambox. When you're doing a long-term assignment, I generally would not select the students in the proficient and standard category because they've already shown in Dreambox that they've mastered this topic. I'm not going to give them a long-term assignment to have them review it. Instead, I might want to give just a short 1 or 2 lesson assignment to give them a little extra review. But a long-term assignment, essentially, they would work in the most challenging lesson, and as long as they did well on that lesson, it's the only one that they would get. So really, those students need a short-term assignment. Or I might even want to think about, okay, so they don't need this concept at a kindergarten level. Maybe there's some related content at a first grade level that I really want them to work through. And that's going to be a better long-term assignment for those students if I do want to create an assignment for them. Once I select the students, then you click the Add Assignment button and it will be added to their account. So when they log in to their student account, they're actually going to see one of their yellow circles will have this icon on it, this long-term assignment icon. I call it the little notebook with a calendar on it. You do want to remind your students that they need to go into those lessons first and play a few of them before they go into their other yellow lessons when they're playing. Now, as the students...
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Thanks for showing that. If teachers go directly off their dashboard to the assigned focus area, I thought I tried doing that a while ago, and you could only assign an activity or a lesson to the class as a whole going that way and not individual students. Is that true?
Actually, that's not true. So going back to the dashboard, are you talking about to this from the standards?
No, I'm talking about going right to the assigned focus, not going through the standards.
Yeah, so you will always have the power to change who you want to have the assignment. So let's actually go through that so I can show it to you real quick. I'm just going to pick a grade level and a domain at random here. There we go. So I can select any of the kids. I just have to put a check mark next to their name.
Okay,
So
yeah, I see that. That's exactly what I was looking for, but I was reviewing it with a teacher about a week or so ago, and I didn't see the option to click next to their name. So obviously it was something I was doing that was different. So
okay.
thanks for clarifying.
No, and I appreciate that clarifying question too. That's great. All right. So one thing that I want to stress about the long-term assignments, that this is not a set it and forget it solution for students. We do want to make sure that after the assignment has been made, when you're going back and reviewing your student data just to make sure that all your kids are getting enough lessons completed and they're not stuck in Dreambox and that they're really doing what they should. Another thing we want to do is if you have a long-term assignment, you want to go back in and just do a quick check-in on that long-term assignment. So I want to go into my dashboard, and for a long-term assignment, I'm going to select that here at the top. So here's the long-term assignments are just listed. I can see this week I made a long-term assignment for Charlie, Roxana, and Valencia. I actually just did that. Let's say I did it a couple days ago. I'm going to check in and see, did they start it? How are they doing? And I notice nobody's clicked into it. If they don't click into it, they're not going to get the intervention and they're not going to make forward progress. So that's one reason that I might want to check in and see how they're doing on this lesson. Have they actually clicked into the assignment? And then the other thing that I want to do is take a look at the student's progress for that particular concept or that lesson. So when I'm thinking about supporting my kids, I want to look to see if, for example, on this student, Susan P., she was assigned a lesson where she started at 0% proficiency for this concept. In week 1, she had 35 minutes and 4 lessons. She gave 17% proficiency, but here we can see that this chart shows us her baseline, where she started, and it also shows us the aim line. That's the green dotted line. That's where we want our students to be week by week as they're working through these lessons so they can get to that 100% proficiency. I can see that in week 1 and week 2, this student was below the aim line. I would say if they are somewhere like 5% or more below the aim line, then I want to go back into the lesson and see what's troubleshoot a little bit. So this actually gets to your question a little bit too, Shannon. So the question she asked is, once you assign an assignment, is there a way to go back and look at the lessons that have been assigned? And absolutely, and we're going to do that actually. So I'm just going to go into a sample assignment here and look at a student. So here's a student who is working through a concept. The first week they did great. So go back to their week 1 lessons. Here I can see that every lesson except for one was completed successfully, and I can play through the individual lessons. And Shannon, let me know if that's what you're looking for. In week 2, they had a couple lessons they struggled on, but they actually had one that they chugged forward. And then here's where the problem started. In week 3, we're not going to see the student move forward as quickly as they had in previous weeks, because now they're starting to have trouble with, looks like exploring angles as rotations multiples of 30 degrees. So this is a much more advanced level of lesson than K2. So we see that the student had 2 lessons that they're really, really struggling on. So this is a point in time where I might want to pull that kid aside, because week 1 and week 2 we're making progress. We were making some progress in week 1. Week 2 we faltered a little bit. In week 3 we're moving backward. So we want to maybe pull that kid aside and talk to them about what's going on in that lesson. Maybe play the lesson with that student. See if they're using help and hint buttons. See if it's the manipulative or if there's some other thing they're not getting. The other reason why I want to do this check-in with the students is I want to make sure that there's not something else going on. Maybe there's something about this exploring angles that the student's not getting, maybe something more foundational that they really need to work through. So this helps me see, okay, you know what? I can see a concept they're having trouble with. I need to go back to something else. Maybe it's not angle measurement and rotation that they're understanding. Maybe there's something else about angles that they're missing and I need to take them back to that. So I do want to do a check about once a week to make sure kids are making progress still. Now, if they really aren't making progress and we see them struggle through multiple initial lessons, like Roxana's here, she had just started lessons. So those were lessons introducing the topic for the very first time. She worked through 3 lessons before Dreambox put the brakes on. We canceled the assignment. So when I click here, it says long-term assignment has been canceled. She didn't demonstrate understanding on the earliest lessons in this topic. So we made a recommendation that you should, instead of assigning this topic, we take the child back to something else at a lower grade level or at the similar grade level. And the reason why we stop and we give you this alert is that you told us this is the concept you wanted the child to work on. We as Dreambox are going to say, okay, this is what the teacher told us to do. We're going to stay within this topic. So if the child needs something at a lower level, we're not going to adapt down to that lower level for this assignment because you as the teacher told us, nope, this is what I want them to work on. And that's why we want to make sure that we're going back in here and monitoring that student progress on a regular basis to make sure that their assignment hasn't been stopped or that the student's not starting to falter or struggle or as falling, their progress is falling below the aim line. Okay. And this is also a printable view. So if you need to bring this into some of your meetings that you have about your students, I know that you all are tracking lots of data about your students. This is something that you would be able to print and to have at your fingertips to show that this is one of the interventions that you used with your students. So this does help document progress, I know, for CSE, RTI meetings. So before we get into anything else, I do want to just pause and see if anyone has any questions about the mechanics of the assignment, suggestions about just monitoring students. And if you're doing well, you understand, you're ready to go, just let me know. Say, I'm good to go or got it. So one other resource that you should have for today's webinar is an explanation of the Dreambox curriculum guide. It's into Dreambox learning lesson groups. These Dreambox learning lesson groups were the way that we sorted the content by grade level and by essentially our version of a domain when we first created the Dreambox learning lessons. One of the reasons why I bring up this Dreambox learning lesson group is this does sort the content for a long-term assignment in a different way. It's very similar oftentimes to some of our Common Core standards, but sometimes it does allow for kind of a broader view of some of the concepts that students would work on through the content in Dreambox. So you can assign students lessons based upon the Common Core standards, or if you like, you could also do it according to the Dreambox Learning lesson groups. I'll show you how to do that just really quickly. Right now, in order to assign the lessons according to Dreambox Learning lesson groups, you would go to a classroom, and you see that there will be 3 buttons next to that classroom: an edit button, Dreambox Access Resources, and then finally Common Core State Standards button, what it will say right now. To change the standards that you want to view and that you want to assign at this time, there'll be a Common Core Standards button that you'll click. All of the standards that are available that Dreambox aligns to will pop down. We want to go to the 3rd set of standards for Dreambox Learning Units. And then when I go to add an assignment, you will see that when you select a grade level, instead of having a domain, you'll have a category, and then you'll have the Dreambox Learning lesson groups. So it's just a different way to sort that content and to provide students with exactly what they need. Now, I do have to say that there is going to be another Dreambox update. What we realize is that this is quite a few steps, quite a few clicks. So very soon what you will see when you make an assignment is you will have the option to assign the standards or to assign the topics. When you go to topics, it will allow you to assign lessons by the Dreambox Learning Units. That actually should come out sometime, I've been told, sometime in the next couple of weeks. You'll have a tab here at the top above us where it says assignment duration, where you can do standards or you can do topics, and the topics will be those Dreambox Learning Units. So then you don't need to go up here and change your overall standards that you're looking at for the whole dashboard. And so that should be helpful if you do want to toggle between those. And just know that you can assign either Common Core or those Dreambox Learning Units. You could even assign, one assignment could be according to Common Core and one could be according to Dreambox Learning Units. It's totally up to you. So just a different way to look at the content and the standards. All right, and before I let you go, I just want to make sure we point out a couple more resources. One resource that can be pretty helpful as you're thinking about reaching the needs of those students is the Math Intervention Teacher Toolkit. This was produced by Dreambox Learning to get everyone thinking about how to best use tools and resources to support your kids through MTSS and RTI. So this white paper is a great resource just to get a brush up on what those processes and procedures should be for it to reach your kids. And Jesse, great question. So they are aligned to Common Core standards. Yeah, thanks, Larissa. All right. So one last question before I let you all go. I want to know what your biggest takeaway is from today's webinar. This is a little reflection. So make sure you use the chat to let us know if you learned anything or you had any aha moments, or it just confirms like, yes, I'm on the right track.
Stacy, I'll chime in. I don't know if you wanted us to post or not. I really
yeah, no, either way.
No, I like the landscape of learning model. You know, the continuum from the strategies and the big ideas and the models and the progressions from bottom to top. I thought that was a pretty neat document.
Awesome, good. And to learn more about it, you know, there are lots of, I know there's so many math materials. There's an entire book that goes with that really sequences you through that landscape of learning and helps you understand the concepts that students need to understand, and even gives examples of how to get students there. And that's Kathy Bosner's Young Mathematicians at Work. It's a pretty easy read, pretty great to go through to understand those learners. And Shannon, I'm so glad that we showed you how to look back at those lessons. Yeah, that data is pretty important. It's pretty powerful and can really help you adjust your instruction. So awesome. Yeah, it is very important to check on those long-term assignments. So great.
Stacy, we'll post the 3 documents that you went over in the online component in e-learning.
Perfect.
So
Thank
all
you.
our teachers will, after they watch the webinar, there's some activities for them to do, and we'll also have those posted.
Fantastic. And Larissa, do you want to talk about those just briefly before we go?
I think Shannon has taken Shannon and Jesse, the rest of the components are in e-learning. So you just go to your student, since you're a student in the class, your student view, and you'll see the class. But I think they've taken other blended webinars, so they should be good. And
Okay.
they have a week to complete it.
Great. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, everyone, thank you all so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I know that you had a long day before this, so I'm glad you all came to today's webinar. And if you have any questions, if you need anything, you're welcome to contact me. If you ever find that you have any issues with Dreambox or you need some immediate assistance, do contact our client success team. More than willing to enable to help you. They're available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the 877 number that's on my screen. And then you can always email them at support@dreambox.com, and they're happy to answer those questions. So I want to thank you all so much for your time today, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks.